Welcome back to another edition of the Magic Latest podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we're going to be talking about next week's kickoff of the Summer League for the Orlando Magic, as well as some more thoughts from analysts about the Orlando Magic's offseason and how it will affect them going into next year. So let's start off with Summer League, right? So the Summer League schedule recently released, and it says that the Orlando Magic will be kicking things off next week on Thursday, July 10th at 7:30 against the Sacramento Kings. They will proceed to play on Sunday, July 13th against the Toronto Raptors, Tuesday on the 15th against the Oklahoma City Thunder, and Wednesday that following week against the Brooklyn Nets. Obviously, the two more intriguing teams to face off against when in a summer league setting will probably be the Oklahoma City Thunder, who will be probably having Nikola Topic, who was their rookie from last year, play in that game as a guy who didn't really get too much burn last season. And then obviously the Brooklyn Nets, who drafted 5 rookies and should likely have at least 3 of them playing in summer league over the next week and a half. So that should be really interesting. The Orlando Magic are in a spot where I feel like the main thing for them is just to be able to see what their newest young guys are able to do in a setting where they have more on-ball chops and they have an ability to kind of showcase their skills in a more open setting. Because let's be honest, summer league is one of those things where it's more about kind of like showing off the skills you've uh, obtained or that you've built on over the summer, not necessarily a good representation of what your role on the team will be. But it does give you a little bit of flexibility, depending on what kind of player you are, to see what you could do if you were asked to step up into a different role where you had to be on ball more or you had more opportunities as a shooter and different things of that nature. So summer league for the Orlando Magic is a little bit different for a hand compared to like a handful of other teams because they don't have too many young guys on their like main roster that still need to be playing summer league minutes, right? Anthony Black is not playing in summer league. Jalen Suggs, Paulo Beccaro, Franz Wagner, they're not playing in summer league. Wendell Carter's far removed from summer league play. So like this team, although they're not like super young, they're also a team that's not like so old either. So they're in a really good medium space of just being within not necessarily the prime of their careers, but in a very good space where these guys are not necessarily needing to play in summer league, just given the fact that a lot of their main dudes are established. But with that being the case, there are 3 guys that I do think are going to be really important to watch during summer league, headlined by second-year player Tristan da Silva, Jace Richardson, and I think Noah Penda is a guy who I think also will be very important to watch on this roster. But Tristan da Silva and Jace Richardson specifically are the most important ones to me. Tristan da Silva, I want to see more on-ball chops from him on the wing, and I want to see him more versatile as a defender. I think he's a guy who has the capability to guard threes and fours in space, play small ball four as a stretch big, and put himself in a position to just be able to do a lot for this team. And I think that Summer League could show a lot more versatility from Tristan da Silva, who didn't show too much in his rookie season given the circumstances. There was kind of a whole lot of different things that kind of affected his ability to really blossom. But I think he showed some flashes here and there. I think just Summer League should be a chance to kind of build on the idea of him becoming more of this Swiss Army knife player. And then Jace Richardson, I think he has to dominate offensively in Summer League. This is a guy that you want to see after, game 2, he's averaging, somewhere between 25 and like 30 points a night on this Orlando Magic team as a go-to option, able to put the ball on the floor, shoot the 3 ball at a high clip, take his matchup off the dribble, and be able to create really easy opportunities for himself, either by getting to the line or creating like jump shots in the mid range. Like you want to see Jace Richardson give you the full offensive package in the way that you draft him for, which is that he could be a guy that not only helps stretch the floor for you, obviously in that backcourt, but gives you another shot creating option next to Paulo Beccaro and Franz Wagner in situations where Desmond Bane and or Jalen Suggs are not on the floor. So I think those 2 guys are really, really important. I think Noah Penda obviously is another guy I mentioned last pod, that I thought that he would be a really interesting player that despite people not being as big on him draft wise in terms of like I believe I mentioned that in the Yahoo Sports grades they gave him about like a CC plus for the pickup. I think that he has the ability, if he shows certain flashes, especially defensively, as a guy who can guard multiple positions. And I think the big jumbo wing ball handling aspect of being able to run an offense next to a Jace Richardson could be really intriguing as a guy who could step in and maybe be on this backup unit next to a player like Anthony Black, Tyus Jones, Jace Richardson. Like, I think that's going to be really important as well to be able to do so. So I think that those three guys are the most important. If I had to rank the most important players in Summer League, I would say let's start with Jace Richardson and his ability to create offensively being like a major, major thing I'm watching for. Tristan da Silva, secondary, as just showing, again, his Swiss Army knife chops as a guy that I think can kind of just do a whole lot of different things on both sides of the ball. And then I will put Noah Penda at 3 as a guy who I think is probably not going to get a whole lot of burn next season with the main group to begin with. So Summer League is just going to be a really good opportunity for him to show off his skills at the next level and see how he stacks up as compared to playing overseas. But I think he's a guy that I still feel like if his skill set translates properly, could earn him some real roster spot minutes consistently with the big squad next year. It's really going to be all dependent on just how good does those intangibles translate, given the fact that he's not a knockdown three-point shooter, but everything else about his build, being 6'8", burly, able to get to the basket, plays with a savvy veteran mindset in terms of having the ball in his hands. All those things, if they translate well, it could spell well for him. But it starts with Summer League as a good representation of just how his game translates at the next level. So that's going to be super, super important. Next up, we're going to talk about yet again another analyst and their thoughts on the Orlando Magic. And in this case, it's in comparison to the Atlanta Hawks. And Channing Frye believes that the Atlanta Hawks, with what they've done this offseason, have significantly jumped over what the Orlando Magic have done. And to be more specific, he says, I think on paper, July 1st, the Hawks jumped where I think on paper, July 1st, the Hawks jumped where Orlando was going to be. I think so. If everyone comes back healthy, the Hawks are a better team than Orlando. He doubles down and says Cleveland, Knicks, then who? Okongwu, Porzingis, Dyson Daniels, Trae Young, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Risa Shea, the number 1 pick. He was nice at the end of the year. Basically, doubling down in that second statement by saying, if you look at it on paper, I mean, hey, he believes that the Atlanta Hawks are better than the Orlando Magic going into next season. And on paper, when you put together a starting 5 that'll probably have Trae Young, Dyson Daniels, likely going to have Zachary Risa-Shea in the starting lineup next to Jalen Johnson, and then you have probably Kristaps Porzingis starting, or he comes off the bench, but I think he would likely start with Okongwu coming off the bench, Nickeil Alexander-Walker as your backup point guard, and they're in a really good situation there, right? I can see what they're saying. I can see what he's saying. I understand where he's coming from, and I'm not necessarily here to push Orlando Magic propaganda from the perspective of saying that the Orlando Magic are significantly better than what the Atlanta Hawks have built. I think the Atlanta Hawks have had one of the best off seasons of any team this summer. I will give them their credit in terms of just what they've been able to do on paper around Trae Young this summer, specifically with being able to bring in Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Kristaps Porzingis and do them in relatively cheap fashions. When you think about the fact that Nickeil Alexander-Walker basically fit into what was their $25 million plus trade exception that they were pretty much sitting on and looking at the chance to be able to add somebody significant. And then obviously the fact that they were able to get Kristaps Porzingis for basically pennies on the dollar, given the fact that they were able to exploit that the Boston Celtics were going through essentially a fire sale of sorts. So when you put all that together, like, yes, you have to give them a lot of respect for what they were able to do on the margins. You pair in the fact that Jalen Johnson's coming back healthy, and you put in the fact that Dyson Daniels is coming off a really strong season defensively for this team. Zachary Risa-Shea, who had a good back half of the regular season, as Channing Frye mentioned, is a guy that you hope has a strong leap in year 2 as well. So there's a lot to like about what the Atlanta Hawks have to do. I also just think that there's still a lot of what ifs. Jalen Johnson has had significant injury history problems over the last 2 to 3 seasons. Dyson Daniels had his first strong year in the NBA as a guy who kind of formulating who he is at the next level. Is he just gonna be a defensive stopper, or is he a guy that has more offensive wiggle to him? That's a whole question by itself. Zachary Ricochet, again, he could have a breakout second season, or he could be a guy like Tyler Hero who actually regressed in around his second to third season, despite having a breakout year where he was one of the better players for the Miami Heat out the gate. Zachary Ricochet could be a guy who actually regresses in a way in year two. Like, there's a lot of different nuances to what the Atlanta Hawks have done. I mean, even include a guy like Kristaps Porzingis, significant injury history problems. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, haven't seen him outside, like really thrive outside of the Minnesota Timberwolves system, where he had, he was a Batman and Robin combination defensively next to Jalen McDaniels. How differently does that change when he plays next to another guard who's of that caliber in Dyson Daniels, right? That's a big difference as well. So there's a lot of variables with the Atlanta Hawks that change them significantly, as opposed to the Orlando Magic, who are simply rolling the ball back out as the team they've been in the past, while adding three-point shooting, which was their biggest hole. So I see what Channing Frye is saying, but me personally, I'm not necessarily as high on the Atlanta Hawks enough to say that they're the third best team in the Eastern Conference just yet. Maybe after a month of seeing this group cohesively build something together, then you can kind of take away some stuff and say, okay, wait a minute, all the moves they made on the margins to make themselves better are now panning out. This might be a team we have to really fear. But right now, I'm not necessarily as strong on what the Atlanta Hawks have done, given the fact that a lot of the players that we're also factoring in are players that average 50, 60 games a season, and they tend to deal with health concerns those other 20-plus games, right? So a lot to really take into consideration. But somebody who was a little bit more high on the Orlando Magic is ESPN's Kevin Clark, who actually went on a whim and predicted that he believes the Orlando Magic will win the Eastern Conference next season. He went on First Take and boldly made the claim that he believes that the Orlando Magic should not only be good next year, but again, come out of the East, saying not only are the Orlando Magic a contender, they're also going to win the Eastern Conference. They already won the offseason with the Bane trade. When I look at the way this roster is set up, guys, I look at simply the defense in hoops and offense that is going to get better. He pretty much doubles down by saying that the acquisition of Tyus Jones, having a guy in Desmond Bane as two new pieces, both guys who shoot about 38 to 41% from beyond the arc, to this roster. He goes on to say that he believes Desmond Bane was the best pickup of the offseason in the Eastern Conference. Now, given what we just said about what the Atlanta Hawks just were able to accomplish, I don't necessarily believe that Desmond Bane was the best acquisition of the summer. You guys let me know in the comment section if you believe otherwise. I don't think that Desmond Bane was the best acquisition of the summer in the Eastern Conference. I think that what Atlanta has been able to do has just been really, really impactful. And if you're talking about just one team going out and making significant changes to their team. I would also say that the New York Knicks being able to get Jordan Clarkson for probably a veteran minimum and bringing in Gershon Yabusele as a backup center or potentially even a starting center behind or in front of Mitchell Robinson, they've done a really, really good job with what they've been able to bring in. I think that what the Cleveland Cavaliers were able to do in the trade market going after Lonzo Ball was also really impactful for a team that does need a defensive guard to be next to Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland right? Like I think that these other teams have made really good moves on the margins. I don't necessarily know if Desmond Bane was the best acquisition, but I do think that Desmond Bane fits the puzzle piece best out of a lot of the acquisitions that's been made this summer. When you talk about perfect fit scenarios, Desmond Bane might be a top 5 perfect fit scenario of any team that's made moves this summer in terms of what he addresses on the Orlando Magic immediately from day one when he steps onto their roster and plays next to Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs, Wendell Carter Jr., right? When he steps on the floor, he automatically fits like a glove, similar to how people say Kevin Durant is going to fit like a glove on the Houston Rockets next to Amen Thompson, Fred VanVleet, Jabari Smith, Alperen Sengun, Tari Eason, as a guy who could come in and be a knockdown shot creator, adds three-point shooting volume to that Houston Rockets team, and gives them an offensive generator next to a whole bunch of defense, right? Same thing can be said for what Desmond Bane does next to Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner as a guy who helps spread the floor. He continues to preach in his interviews, and he said in his introductory press conference that he understands that the Orlando Magic were one of the worst three-point shooting teams, not just last season, but in league history, and that they are going to address that out the gate. And I think between Jace Richardson, Desmond Bane, and Jalen Suggs that they can really, really significantly improve that three-point shooting in just one season turnaround. And if they can take that from a 30% shooting team in as a team last year and bump that up to 36, 37% as a team. Let's say even league average at 35% as a team shooting the three ball this season, that significant jump will change their offense in a way that will desperately address not only their biggest hole, but I think will also make them one of the more dynamic offenses in the entire NBA. I would even go on a limb and say I think this is a team that could be a top 10 offense next year if they even crack 35% as a three-point shooting team, if not better. If they could be a 35% shooting team as a squad, I feel like they will end up in the year as one of the highest scoring offenses in the NBA. Like I said, I will put them in the top 10 next year. But with that being the case, my question of the day for you guys is where do you guys believe the Orlando Magic will finish next season? Channing Frye doesn't even think the Orlando Magic are the third best team in the East, while Kevin Clark believes that the Orlando Magic will be coming out of the Eastern Conference next season. Which one do you think is more likely? A top finish in the East or a middle of the pack finish for the Orlando Magic? I'm interested to hear what you guys say. And remember to like, comment, subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. But until next episode, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.